Good morning. Today is Tuesday, March the 14th, 2017. It's 10 a.m. It's my pleasure to call to order today's meeting of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Ms. Lisa Mosby, will you please call the roll?
Ennis Bridges, Mark Cawthron,
Here.
Robert Davis, Jeff Duffer,
Here.
Robert Helms,
Here.
Clark McKinney,
Here.
Charles Rahm.
Here.
Mr. President, 5 of the 7 members are here. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Mosby. First item on the agenda is to take a look at the agenda and approve it.
So move.
A motion by Mr. McKinney, second by Mr. Rahm. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item will be the minutes.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rahm, second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Legal report, Ms. Allison Renfro and Ms. Pamela Spicer.
Good morning. It's just me today, Allison. The first complaint, number 2017-003181, against an establishment. A complaint was filed by a consumer who states the following grievances against an establishment. First, the staff seemed too busy and overwhelmed to attend to the family. Then, when the family drove from the building to the burial plot, they found an urn sitting on the table at complainant's mother's burial site. Upon learning that the establishment had the wrong urn present, the funeral director took the urn back inside, leaving the family in 14-degree weather for 15 minutes. When the family was speaking at the burial site, the funeral director was guiding gravediggers to the site. Complainant states a rude man arrived and jerked the covers off the chairs and started folding and stacking them. When it came time to put the urn in the vault, the rude man and funeral director realized they had no glue to seal the remains. Once again, the funeral director went inside to remedy the situation while leaving the family in the cold. In its response, the establishment staff expressed its shock to hear complainant filed a complaint, as the family seemed appreciative of the way things were handled while acknowledging there were a few issues along the way. The funeral director dropped off a staff associate who had mistakenly thought the urn in her possession was the urn for complainant's mother at complainant's mother's burial site. Other burial site. When the funeral director reached the other burial site and realized she did not have the urn for that site, she immediately went back to complainant's mother's site. The establishment asserts the urn was being retrieved from complainant's mother's burial site as the family pulling up to the site, which took a matter of minutes. The funeral director apologized and acknowledged to the family that the associate had accidentally gotten out of the car with the other urn. When the service was over, the family stated they wanted to see the urn placed and lowered in the vault, which had not been discussed when making funeral arrangements, which necessitated a trip back inside at that time to get the glue to fulfill the family's wishes. The establishment contends that the glue issue was remedied and the interment was then completed. It is therefore legal's recommendation to close this case with a letter of warning, especially in regards to professional conduct. It was the responsibility of the establishment's funeral director to ensure the appropriate urn was taken to and placed at the correct grave site for interment, and the funeral director should have maintained proper decorum around the interment site. The funeral rule requires that members of the public be treated in a respectful manner.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Duffer, second by Mr. McKinney. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All motion passed. Next, please.
All right, the next cases involve a funeral director and the two establishments that the funeral director owns. Upon inspection of these establishments, it was discovered that the funeral director's license had expired on June 30th, 2016, and was not reinstated until July 20th, 2016. During the time period when the license was not valid, the funeral director completed the funeral arrangements for 2 persons. In her response, the funeral director expressed her remorse for the error. She stated she has been licensed since 1979 and had not experienced negativity towards neither her personal license or her establishment license. She stated she did not receive a renewal notice, and upon learning that license had expired, immediately contacted the board office and renewed the license. And this, by the way, are complaint numbers 2017 0077 4 1, 2, and 3.
Motion to accept the recommendation.
Second.
A motion, Mr. Rom, second by Mr. McKinney. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, please.
And finally, complaint number 2016069071 against an establishment. The complaint was filed by a consumer who states the establishment denied her from seeing her son's remains. Complainant's son and his cousin died when the motorcycle they were riding crashed into a tractor trailer at a high rate of speed. Complainant is concerned the remains of her son and his cousin got mixed up by the establishment. The establishment responded, complainant responded to the response, and legal requested an investigation. Upon investigation, the police officer who worked the crash scene stated via sworn affidavit that the bodies were removed from the crash scene and identified by the medical examiner's office. The police officer stated that the son's body was not in as severe condition as the cousin's, as the son's body had many broken bones, but his face remained intact. The apprentice funeral director stated via sworn affidavit that as each body was brought out separately from the forensic center, that each body bag was opened for visual identification, and the toe tag containing personal information was matched with the chain of custody form. After checking and confirming the identification of the first body, he signed the electric signature form and placed the remains in the transfer vehicle and repeated the same process for the second body. He checked the chain of custody paperwork when the bodies arrived at the funeral home. He opened the body bags, checked the toe tags labeled with personal information, matched that information to the chain of custody forms, completed an aluminum identification device which includes name, date of birth, date of death, social security number, and secured that device on the toe for both bodies. Because the cousin was being sent for cremation, he was never placed on the embalming table and stayed on the removal cot, but the apprentice funeral director placed the son on the embalming table in the preparation room. The embalmer stated via sworn affidavit that the bodies were properly tagged and the son's body was on the embalming table. The embalmer stated via sworn affidavit that complainant had refused to come to the establishment and meet with him or the funeral directors, so he met with the complainant's son's uncle. The embalmer's recommendation regarding the cousin was immediate cremation due to complete facial, torso, and limb obliteration, which made him unable to be restored or even embalmed effectively. The embalmer's recommendation was that while the son could be embalmed, he was not able to be restored to the point of viewing due to the extreme facial and head trauma, and a closed casket service would have to take place. The message that complainant's son could not have an open casket service or be viewed was conveyed by the uncle and his wife to complainant and other family members. The uncle clarified via sworn affidavit that he did not view or identify the remains, but was at the establishment to pay the cousin's funeral bill, which he paid. After obtaining the professional opinion of the embalmer and using his 20 years' experience as a funeral director and personally observing the condition of the body to have severe head and face trauma and several broken bones, the funeral director concurred with the embalmer in recommending that complainant and her family members should not view the son's remains. Complainant stated that when she went to the establishment and demanded to see her son, she was shown the casket selected for him with a body bag inside. The funeral director removed an identifying metal tag out of the casket that had her son's information and showed her. Complainant authorized her sister to view the body and advised her whether complainant could handle seeing him. Inside the black bag was another bag that had been zipped and the zipper sealed with tape to prevent leakage. Complainant's sister observed that there was room at the top and bottom of the casket and was sure it was the son because he was much shorter than the cousin, and thought if it had been the cousin would have filled the casket. Prior to the accident, complainant stated her son was approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall, and the cousin was approximately 6 feet 4 inches tall. The funeral director stated that the establishment staff did not refuse complainant's request of viewing her son's remains. However, once the sister made her observation, complainant and the family members seemed satisfied that it was the son in the casket because of body size. Complainant was satisfied until she received the medical examiner's report that said because of the injuries, the cousin's height had become 5 feet 10 inches. The medical examiner's case file for the son notes a height of 65 inches and 169 pounds with black curly hair and tattoos which the file describes. The medical examiner's case file for the cousin notes a height of 70 inches and 185 pounds and severe skull trauma. The crematory file for the cousin indicated a weight of 180 pounds. The crime scene photographs indicate the person with curly hair and tattoos that matched the medical examiner's description had a damaged but intact face. Complainant states that she was charged for embalming an autopsied body, but no autopsy was performed. In its response, the funeral director stated that numerous charges were made to the funeral arrangements after complainant signed the original bill. However, the funeral director could not get complainant to come to the establishment and finalize the changes. The revised bill removing the autopsied embalming fee of $825 was replaced with the general embalming fee of $785. The family requested a public visitation, so while the service would not be open casket, the body would still be present. Therefore, embalming was necessary to prevent further decomposition and for sanitary and health reasons, according to the funeral director. A family member stated that the establishment did everything it could to help the family after other funeral homes in the area turned complainant down for financial reasons. Complainant states the establishment agreed to handle the funeral service for her son for a $1,000 down payment and holding her car title until the balance was paid in full. The establishment stated the agreement was that the funeral expenses would be paid by the $1,000 down payment and the remainder would be paid from a GoFundMe account. Complainant did not release the GoFundMe donations to the funeral home as previously agreed upon, but instead used the $2,752 to purchase her son a headstone. Therefore, legal recommends closing this case with a letter of instruction.
Members of the board, there are several issues in this complaint I personally am uncomfortable with and how they were handled. Just to close with a letter of instruction to me is a misjustice from this board. Personally feel like there needs to be a fine levied to this firm. And I would recommend $1,000.
Especially from the non-viewing.
That is correct. Just from several of the issues that took place, from the miscommunication, from the funeral home to the family, and just having been in funeral service for 30 plus years, it was not handled well. And it's just a personal opinion. I just think it could have been handled much, much better for both the family and the funeral home.
In the final paragraph of the summary of where it says a family member stated the establishment did everything it could to help the family, that family member spoke with one of the investigators. Is that correct? Okay.
You know what the relation was to that?
That family member, that was the uncle's wife.
A lot of this goes back just to the fact that the family didn't have the opportunity to view. And I know at our funeral home, we encourage it. Maybe not with an immediate family member, but we actually encourage at least someone to view that the family trust, be a designee. So I understand. That's hard for a family, especially after the fact. Got a motion?
I'll make it in form of a motion, yes. That a fine of $1,000 be instituted along with a letter of instruction.
Second. Hearing none, that motion fails for lack of a second.
I feel a little better about council's recommendation, given that investigators went out and actually, it sounds like did a pretty in-depth study on this one.
Feel like that the investigator got all of the facts? Do you feel like there's been a thorough investigation?
The investigation was 49 and a half hours of total time, and there were several people that he spoke with and obtained affidavits. He spoke with the police officer and went to the crematory. I felt like it was very thorough. It helped explain to me the chain of custody that someone not working in the funeral industry may not understand, but just how that remains is carried out. That to me was explain that to me.
Funeral home has not had any prior violations
That's
of any
correct.
kind.
Within the last 5 years. That's as far back as our search history goes.
As a funeral director.
Based on that, I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation.
Questions or discussions?
May just be difference in terminology, but it says close with a letter of instruction. Warning instead of instruction. Does a letter of warning, doesn't it have a little bit more heft to it?
Yes, that would be the next step before formal disciplinary action. A letter of warning or a letter of instruction would both show up in their disciplinary history going forward, but certainly a letter of warning would be sterner.
Is there a second to Mr. Cochran's motion? That motion fails for a lack of second.
Do we want to change it to a letter of warning?
I'd feel a little better.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we close with a letter of warning.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Cochran, second by Mr. McKinney. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
Mark Carthren,
Yes.
Jeff Duffer,
Yes.
Robert Helms,
No.
Clark McKinney,
Yes.
Charles Rahm.
No.
Mr. President, we have 3 yes and 2 no.
Motion carries. That's a good example of a case that there's no winners. There's just not. There's a lot of emotions. There's, by law, nothing was done illegally. It's just difference of opinions. But it makes our job very difficult. Anything else, Ms. Renfro?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. First item to speak of today is a performance audit update. The as you've been aware, we've been discussing this since about September. I think it was the first time I mentioned it. I looked yesterday in my notes. September of 2016, I think, was the first time I mentioned to you that the Comptroller of the Treasury, the Division of State Audit, and they still continue in the process of conducting the performance and compliance audit for the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers and other regulatory boards within the Department of Commerce and Insurance. Since our last board meeting on February the 14th of this year, Ms. Mosby, who is our administrative manager, and I have responded to auditors' questions via emails. It's my understanding that this audit is drawing toward the end. I won't say near the end because we never know exactly when it will be finished, but it's further along than it was, and we'll continue to keep the board updated as the audit progresses. The next item is a legislative update. Before you, I have four bills there that I want to speak about. Senate Bill 0019. This, as it's introduced, prohibits the disposition or removal of human remains unless authorized by a person legally entitled to control such disposition or removal with certain exceptions. And it's expected that an amendment will be filed to this bill probably later this week. It's our understanding, or my understanding, that the sponsor has been working with some funeral-related organizations and maybe wording the bill in a better way. It's my understanding it doesn't change the original bill or the intent of it. There is different words, but it doesn't change the original intent of it. It has to do with if a funeral home selects, it has to do if a family selects a particular funeral home and subsequently decides to use another funeral home. It has to do with when about the charges for the first funeral home will be payable at the time of transfer. Senate Bill 0428, House Bill 0471, as introduced, removes Social Security number from the information that the funeral establishment must include on the permanent identification device attached to a dead human body prior to interment. I think I mentioned last month, all I've seen on that still removes it for interment. It does not include cremation at this point. So it's a good possibility there'll be an amendment filed to that as well that would include the removal of the Social Security number from cremated remains, as well as for those bodies that are being interred. Senate Bill 0611 and House Bill 0624, as introduced, defines funeral directing to include the directing and supervising of other commemorative services, in addition to the existing services provided by law, such as supervising funerals, preparing dead human bodies for burial, disposing of dead human bodies, maintaining a place for care of dead human bodies, and other services. There has been an amendment filed to this bill. Amendment number 004671 is an amendment that we've been made aware of, and it kind of narrows what the bill does. This is a bill that would allow funeral directors to perform services for non-human remains. The selling of merchandise and services and providing those services. It's still somewhat not real defined as to what it is, but it's more narrow. The amendment's more narrow than what the original bill was. And probably if this bill passes, this may be something that the board will want to consider doing rulemaking for, so that if there's any ambiguity there, that rules would clear that up. And the last one listed is Senate Bill 1305 and House Bill 1217. As introduced, this requires that of the 10 hours of continuing education coursework required for the renewal of a licensure of either a funeral director or embalmer, 5 of those hours must be attended in person, which means the coursework is either completed in the physical presence of the provider of the coursework or through an interactive virtual program that requires participants to confirm their presence during the program. And those are the ones that directly affect funeral service. And you can always go to the legislative website and see where they're moving. Some of them are moving faster than others. None of them have completed the whole process yet. licensee report. It's a report of license that administratively been approved by the executive director pursuant to the board authority for the period of February 14, 2017 through March 13, 2017. And you have a list of all individuals. There are no establishments that are on this report. However, to update the board, yesterday afternoon, Council Hooper received a signed agreed order of license probation regarding Rest Haven Memorial Gardens, which was before the board last month. And as you'll recall, that document was to be signed by the owner of that establishment, by President Helms from the board, and by myself. So they sent that document, executed document, back to Ms. Hooper yesterday, and Mr. Helms signed it this morning, and I signed it as well. So we will be issuing the license either later today or tomorrow to Rest Haven, but we wanted to make you aware of that, since that establishment is not listed on this report as to what the status of that was. There are no closed establishments since the last board meeting. Disciplinary action report. It's a report of consent orders administratively accepted or approved by the executive director pursuant to board authority for the period of February 1, 2017 through February 28, 2017. And you see a listing of 3 there that are related in some form or fashion to unlicensed activity. And you see those that were listed, the civil penalties they paid, and those consent orders have been signed. Complaint report. Ms. Mosby advises that the number of complaints as of March 13, 2017, there were 5 that were open against either a funeral director and/or embalmer, and 28 against an establishment, for 33 total complaints. Mr. President, that concludes my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions that any board member has, if you have those.
Gribble? If not, I entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Got a motion by Mr. McKinney, second by Mr. Duffer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item will be approval of license applications.
Mr. President, there are no individuals to come before the board this month. There are 2 establishments, taking them in alphabetical order. The first establishment is TriStar Cremation. If those representatives would come forward to the table over there beside Miss Mosby. All of you can come if you want to, or whatever. We'll get you another chair if there's not enough chairs. Board members, this application is from TriStar Cremation. The proposed manager of this proposed establishment is Charles Timothy Rayleigh. It's to be located at 4962 Lebanon Road in Old Hickory, Tennessee. It's a new establishment. It's owned by a corporation. The corporation's Old Hickory Cremation Incorporated, and has a address registered with the Secretary of State's office at 8120 Sawyer Brown Road, Suite 108, Nashville, Tennessee. If you gentlemen would, since there are 3 of you and only 2 microphones there, please speak a little bit louder than you normally would, and just identify yourselves for the record, and then make whatever opening comments you would like to make to the board about what you propose to do.
I'm Charles Timothy Rayleigh, Tim Rayleigh, and I'll be the
Steve Murphy will be one of the ownership.
Jeff Murphy, one of the owners. President, members of the board, we're submitting an application for an establishment license for a, I guess you would say, a non-traditional funeral establishment. As Mr. Gribble stated, at 4962 Lebanon Road. This is in a private office, like may call it a mall, a strip mall. There are 4 other businesses next to us. Office where we arrange for cremation and burial services. The services held at the facility, and all of the preparation work, cremation things will be done at another location.
Will the cremation work be done at one of your other facilities?
It will. It'll be done at Music City Crematory Service.
Board members, the only question that I had was, and Mr. Murphy and I had a discussion about this yesterday, and he sent an email that's included in your documents today. The actual physical address of the business is 4962 Lebanon Road, and the zoning from the Metropolitan Government shows a 4960 Lebanon Road address. And Mr. Murphy explains in his email that they questioned the zoning officer about that, and they were told that it was all platted under one plat under 4960 Lebanon Road, and that's the reason it doesn't exactly identically match up. And then he listed in his email the other occupants of buildings within that complex.
Like a strip mall facility?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Same type business that you have in Bellevue, is that correct? Okay. I would make a motion for approval.
Second.
Motion by, excuse me, motion by Mr. McKinney, second by Mr. Cochran. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Robert, thank you.
Get you a license. We'll send you an email, and hopefully today or tomorrow we'll get that to you. If you have any questions, just let me know. Board members, the next establishment to appear before you today is Unity Memorial Funeral Home. If representatives from that group would come forward and have a seat, please. This is Unity Memorial Funeral Home. The proposed manager of the proposed establishment is Christy Leanne Roberts. This establishment is to be located at 210 Bellevue Avenue South in Fayetteville, Tennessee. It's a new establishment. The ownership is a limited liability company, the owner being Unity Memorial Funeral Home, LLC, 210 Bellevue Avenue South, Fayetteville, Tennessee. If you would, please identify yourselves and speak a little louder than you normally would, since there are only two mics to pick that up, and tell the board what your purpose in being here today is, please.
Angel Wilson, Fayetteville, Tennessee, unlicensed assistant who has been serving the funeral home for about 15 years.
Be the acting manager and licensed funeral director.
Thomas Robinson, been in the funeral industry over 25 years.
Board members, this is a funeral home that's located where the former Sledge Funeral Home is located in Fayetteville. Sledge Funeral Home closed some period of time ago. And we first received an application back September the 6th, I believe. And our field representative has been working with the applicant to get everything ready to bring to you. The some questions that I'm unsure about, and maybe the applicant can let us know about that. I know when the field rep has done 2 inspections there that there's been a question concerning the ability to lock the embalming room door. From the photos, it's my understanding that there were folding doors there, and there was inability to lock the door. There is some question concerning a parking lot. It's my understanding that there's, and if I misrepresent any of this, you speak up and correct it. And
corrected and have brought pictures. We've corrected that prep room door.
Okay. In the parking lot, the city, there is no off-street parking, I don't think, at the time, and the city has said that they can construct a parking lot to the south of the building, and has given them permission to commence that, but I don't think at this time, unless it's just been commenced in the past few days, that that's been done yet.
There is a lot that the funeral home that Sledge was using, but it's not asphalt, which we're in the process of getting the asphalt. But we have 2 churches that all are going to use the parking area together.
The thing is, it is a small community, and it is very seldom that we have actual funeral services there, just gathered from, our history of being there before. Most of our services are held at a church service. Really, the main thing that is done there is the prep work and a come-and-go visitation.
There was one other thing, and at one time, we were initially informed that Ms. Roberts would be a part-time employee, but we've been later informed that you would be a full-time employee, which of course is required for a manager for a funeral establishment. If you have those photos, could you give them to Ms. Mosby and let her show those to the board members?
Angel's going to email those photos to me.
Roberts, you are a licensed embalmer, is that correct?
I am not a licensed embalmer. I'm a licensed funeral director. We do have Lawrence, our licensed embalmer.
So what is the embalmer number 3759? Whose number is that on this application?
That's Lawrence Walter Sloan. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that? I'm sorry. That is Thomas Graham. He has health problems now and is not able to do it. So we have had, she updated, and I updated with Mr. Luna, Mr. Sloan's license when this change came about recently.
On the last amended application which they filed with the board yesterday, Mr. Sloan is listed there with the license number 3950.
Yes.
Angel, do you care to explain to the board what you've done to correct the embalming room doors? To what kind of door you've installed, and what kind of lock, or since
We have added it's a double lock, padlock, lock on the door. I guess the easiest.
when was that installed?
Saturday.
On Saturday. And one other thing I forgot to ask about is Mr. Luna noted in his report to me that upon inspection of the men's restroom, it was quite evident by sound that the lavatory drain has substantial leakage when water is turned on. Has that been corrected?
That was fixed the Friday that he left.
And he viewed on his second inspection, he did see that is corrected.
That had been corrected?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Looking at your picture, you just added a lock to those folding doors,
Yes, sir.
didn't you?
They're
Okay.
not actually folding. They're wooden doors. They're not actually folding. It's double
Okay.
wooden
Just
doors.
double hung.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And that picture is
I
taken
apologize.
No, you're good. And that picture that you've passed around is taken from inside
Yes,
of the
sir.
embalming room.
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
I suppose the photos from the inside, so
Yes,
you
sir,
have
it is.
and there's a key on the outside.
It is.
What about the width between the doors? Because there's a rule that requires. Let me look the rule up.
You all bring pictures of the other side of the door.
Yes, ma'am. It's on there.
Okay.
The other way.
It doesn't appear to be a crack on that side of the door when you look at it from that side, but from one side it appears that there's a pretty wide gap there in the door, and I guess what I was.
When I took that picture, I did not close the door all the way, but it actually does seal.
It does look like from the other side it completely. comes
Yes,
through
sir.
and-
There's an
but,
extra strip of wood
okay.
on that other side. Nope, I may have just messed it up.
I'll turn it back on.
That was my fault. It was a mistake handing it to me. Sorry about that.
That's it.
You did it.
We don't have any pictures of a parking lot or where do your patrons park when they come for a visitation or?
It's on a corner, so they use the on the edge of the street, and they do use. It's not lined, but the parking lot area is utilized. It's just not lined and stripped.
Do you all anticipate on the parking lot being complete?
We had said once we were allowed to open within the first 3 months that parking lot would be done.
Is there any reason for the delay?
It's finances.
But what does the regulation say about parking?
The regulation 0660-06-.1 states as follows. Each person desiring to obtain an establishment license shall submit to the board a completed application on a form prescribed by the board and the fees as required by Chapter 0660-03 of these rules, along with the following documentation. And the documentation is a letter of approval from the local zoning authority, which shall include at a minimum the following information: parking space availability required for that location, or a statement indicating that the zoning authority has no requirements with respect to parking. So it suggests that there needs to be a letter indicating that parking is available as required for that location. Here we have a letter dated February 20th, 2017. It's page 51 on your iPads. and it says this letter is to certify that the Unity Memorial Funeral Home has met all the requirements of design for a parking facility to serve this business. The City of Fayetteville's Planning Commission has reviewed the plans for this parking and approved them at their regular meeting on January 24th, 2017. Therefore, the city believes that Unity Memorial Funeral Home may thus begin process on development of said parking and begin operations accordingly. So it looks like the design of their parking has been approved by the Zoning Commission. We don't have anything saying that they don't have any requirements, Fayetteville,
Okay.
with respect to parking, only that they've approved their design. And we also have a letter from the Fayetteville Planning Commission dated a couple of months before that, October 28, 2016, which states it is the opinion of this office that Sledge Funeral Home, which is also Unity Memorial Funeral Home, as indicated in the address of would be allowed to exist at this location, even though it is considered nonconforming, because this location was and continues to be a funeral home. If and when the above referenced location discontinues to be used as a funeral home or is damaged that repairs exceed more than 50% of the building's value, the property would then revert back to an R3 zone. So it looks like it's been approved for use as a funeral home pursuant to the zoning, and they've approved the parking lot plans and authorized them to go ahead and develop that parking lot.
Know how long it'll be before you get your parking lot ready?
It should be probably 3 to 4 months. The contractor that was using, he said he's working on the interstate at this moment, and he said he'll be able to get to us in about 3. As soon as he give us a call and can start work on it, we'll be ready to start or something, you know.
You said there's currently a gravel parking lot that Sledge Funeral Home
Yes, sir.
used to use. Do you own that property?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's what you're going to
That's
pave.
the reference parking,
Yeah,
yes.
that's where we're parking and we'll be using. That's what we will be using now.
Okay.
Yes, and it can hold like about, we can get like 50 to about 50 cars, 50, 60 cars in it, and then we got church parking lots that combine.
Adjacent to the property.
Yes.
Verify from my personal information, the parking lot that is gravel, is that the same parking lot that you're going, that's been approved?
Yes, sir.
For, okay, so it's
Yes,
not
sir.
not an additional parking space, it's one that's already.
This
Already
right
there.
here already, but Sledges was used.
And you're going to asphalt it. I mean,
Yes, sir.
That's your plan.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And one of our concerns with the rule, from a legal perspective, the rule says they must supply a letter which shall include at a minimum, and then it says parking space availability required for that location, or a statement indicating that the zoning authority has no requirements. And here, the design has been approved, but we don't have anything from the zoning authority saying that parking space is available sufficient for their approval, which is a difference. And so we would encourage the board to consider that because right now we don't know that this lot that they're talking about here today is in fact available for use, and that's one of legal's concerns here.
So I see in the Planning Commission's letter that they say what the requirements are for parking spaces. What we would need. Sorry, I'll ask. I was going to wait on Ms. Hooper there.
Looking at the same thing that says they may begin process on development of
So
said parking and begin operations accordingly. Now, to me, that kind of almost seems like you can begin after you get your parking lot fixed.
And the October letter is somewhat interesting. It says on there the zoning requirement pertaining to parking would be as follows for a funeral home, and then it says
That's
the
what I was looking at.
requirement, and it says in the letter that they're allowed to continue to exist as a funeral home. So, I mean, that particular letter gives some insight that perhaps because they are zoned as a funeral home and these are the requirements for a funeral home, therefore they're allowing them to use it. But that same letter says it's considered non-conforming, but they're going to go ahead and approve it.
You go ahead.
My understanding, the Sledge Funeral Home used this for a parking lot, and they were in business before, correct? So
1947, yes, before they
So-
closed.
I would assume that the city of Fayetteville allowed them to use that without any recourse.
I would think that also.
Yeah.
Would it make legal feel better if we had a letter from the planning commission stating that the current parking lot is sufficient to operate a funeral home?
I mean, that's we would say strongly implied in the October 2016 letter. We just wanted the board to be aware of what the exact rule is in making this decision. I mean, when you read both letters together, it suggests that the parking, the zoning requirement for the parking is sufficient. We have a parking lot that's not done yet, but the rule doesn't necessarily require that it be a completed parking lot. It says parking space availability, meaning is there parking available consistent with the zoning regulations. And here it sounds like there is parking available. It's just not paved the way that the establishment would like.
Right.
And that's something that could be done at a later date, but it sounds like the parking is available. And if you read both letters from the city of Fayetteville, you can surmise that they've met the requirement of at least having parking available for their guests. And I mainly say that because they do go ahead and they grant them permission to exist at that location, and then they discuss what the zoning requirements are. So implicit in that is, had they not met those zoning requirements, they would not have allowed them to exist at this location, or they would have probably required them to construct more parking area before giving them permission to exist. And part of their reason for doing it is the historic nature of that establishment, in that it was used as a funeral home for an extended period of time prior. So they took that into consideration as well.
And you said the inspector saw where the pipe had been fixed, where the drainage pipe had been fixed.
Yes, sir, he did. He saw that on his second inspection.
Okay.
That second inspection in February, was that February the 27th? Is that, because I'm looking at a field report, February
No, sir,
27th.
He's been there once since then. He was there the following week after that, the first week of March.
Is what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the deficiencies in his field report on February 27th, and that's what we're looking at as
Yes,
well.
sir. He did an inspection the week following that, and so we made a lot of corrections before he came back for the second.
President, on page 59 on the iPad is a March 6, 2017 inspection. In that, he makes remarks that the embalming room entrance door, which has been discussed and talked about earlier, and about the name of a different trade embalmer than the one previously submitted to the board. revised employee letter, which has been sent to the board office. Those were the remarks that he made on the March 6th inspection. And concerns with the wording on some price lists, but that's been corrected to his satisfaction as well. They submitted that subsequently.
And the other deficiencies have been corrected.
Yes, sir.
How many services do you anticipate doing on a yearly basis?
Looking at the other funeral homes from over the past years, the average is right around 40, and that's just within Lincoln County.
Is Mr. Sloan, the embalmer, is he in good record?
Boy, as to my knowledge, he is. I don't usually, if I don't recognize the name, that's a good thing. So I don't recognize, I don't recognize anything about the name. So to my knowledge, I'll be glad to go check if you want me to. But to my knowledge, there's no problems.
I trust your memory.
Any other questions or discussions?
How large is the building?
Including a basement underneath that we won't be using it for services.
Okay.
Just because I'm unfamiliar with the area, how far is the crematory from your location?
The crematory that we will be using is in Winchester. It's about 30 minutes from us.
How do you plan to do your identification before cremation?
For our identification tags,
Is that what you're going to do?
we will do identification tags as soon as the body arrives to our facility.
Who's going to identify the body?
We will have a family member, whether it be immediate or whoever the family chooses. There will be a family member to identify.
I have no other question, Mr. President.
Seeing that the deficiencies have been corrected, and we have the letters from the Fayetteville Zoning Board, I guess maybe you can tell there's a little hesitancy in me because you don't have your parking lot fixed yet. But if the city of Fayetteville is on board, I don't see any reason to deny this application at this time. So I'll make a motion we approve it.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McKinney and second by Mr. Cochran. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Robertson or Miss Roberts, we'll be in touch with you today or tomorrow one about the license.
Okay.
We'll get with you, but phone numbers, I don't know if you have some permanent phone numbers you're going to give us or not. I think what we've had before has been temporary.
Yes, sir. I will. I'll get my cell phone. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. And over the next few days, that's where you can reach me.
I'm talking about the license, the numbers for the establishment.
There will be a permanent. We were waiting to get this done, so there will be permanent phone number established now.
But let us know and communicate with us when you get those, please.
Yes, sir. I sure will. Thank you.
Business?
We have any, does council foresee any rulemaking sessions coming up in the next few months or near future?
It is possible in the next few months, probably not in the next 2 months.
Okay.
Maybe later this summer, it's a possibility. Reviewing some of the rules at this time.
Okay.
Any other new business? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Duffer.
Second.
Second, Mr. Cochran. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.